and we are going to be scuba diving near the American Samoa Islands. Very, very, very pretty water. As you can see, we're sitting in Typhoon Cove right now, and we're going to dive down deep into the Pacific Ocean and check out some reefs and some atolls. A bunch of different things today. Hopefully, if you like scuba diving or snorkeling, you'll really, really enjoy today's field trip. Some of the most gorgeous waters on the earth, actually. So today, as I said, we're going to be visiting the American Samoa Islands. It is the southernmost U.S. territory. It is 2,500 miles south of Hawaii, which is, we think of as Hawaii as a very southern place in the United States. This is 2,500 miles south of Hawaii. There is actually a national park. The United States National Park System has a national park in the American Samoa Island, and it was established in 1988. Wasn't until 1993, a quick fact, that it actually became a national park because there was a 50-year lease agreement that had to be signed by the local villages on the island. And there's a lot of native people that live on the American Samoa Island. So that lease agreement had to be arranged with them. We didn't want to quite have to steal. We didn't want to steal land from them, so that we did make that lease agreement. So the national park of the American Samoa is a huge part of that is actually coral reefs. And one of the reasons why it's a national park is it means it's protected. No one can take off the coral reefs. And there's funding, of course, that's available to help maintain the coral reefs as well. The coral reefs here are part of one of the most remote national parks in the United States. The national park was officially made a national park in 1988. When there was a 50-year lease, and it was agreed to by the Samoan chiefs, by the Samoan tribe that lives on the island. So also on the island, it's not just all in the ocean. Of course, there's an island, and in that island, there's a rainforest. So it's the islands of American Samoa are 14 degrees south of the equator, so it's really, really close to the equator. And that gives them a hot and rainy climate year-round. Typhoon Cove, not tofu, not like the food, is surrounded by lush tropical rainforests, which are home to numerous plants and different types of animal species. Next, we're going to dive down into Typhoon Cove. The underwater view of Typhoon Cove is fairly typical of American Samoa, but we're not going to focus on just the typical sites of our underwater expedition. We're off to see some most unique sites. Few of these sites, not a lot of people have actually seen before. And these locations are so special, they're protected by they're protected under America's National Marine Sanctuaries Program. So the marine life in the American Samoas, if you look over here, American Samoa has many species of coral, fish, and other marine life, meaning it has a high level of marine biodiversity. Here's Typhoon Cove. You see many different types of coral in an assortment of shapes and colors, and as we go on, you'll see even more different types of shapes and colors. Down here, you'll actually see some volcanic rock. This volcanic rock here is typical of American Samoa. Due to its isolated nature of the islands, they frequently get pounded by big waves. So they're out. Imagine an island out in the middle of nowhere. Obviously, the waves are going to be huge, and so they're really going to push away anything, and they're really going to carve out those rocks, and really. They have a huge effect on those waves have a huge effect on the cove. So there's a scuba diver in the picture here. This scuba diver is or scuba diving is really a fantastic way to explore coral reefs because you can join the marine creatures in their natural habitat. Using a tank of air on your back, you can gain ability to temporarily breathe underwater. And if you've watched some of these other virtual field trips that I've done, the swimming with the sharks, we did see some scuba divers there. Very popular tourist attraction is to swim with sharks, and we talked a little bit about that when we went to swimming with the sharks on a few weeks ago on the virtual field trip. And then there's another one, I think it was the second one that I did, were the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. And that also shows a lot of scuba diving. All three of these areas are hugely popular in scuba diving because of the beautiful view that you do get in the diverse marine biology. So if you like marine biology, it's a really cool place to go. Next up, we have the Fago Bay. The National Marine Sanctuary of American Samoa is one of a network of 14 protected marine areas across the United States, created to protect and preserve natural and cultural resources in areas of special significance. The first area of American Samoa to be declared marine sanctuary was Fago Bay. This naturally protected bay was formed by a collapsed volcanic crater and surrounded by steep forested cliffs. Pretty cool. So over here, you'll see over here there's a school of fish right there. There are extensive coral reefs here, rich in marine life. Protecting these marine environments is important, and one way to do this is to set aside a marine protected areas, such as the National Marine Sanctuary in American Samoa. This coral in front of us is very unique. It's not, it's kind of a little bit of a different coral. You might not have seen that before, but this is called a staghorn coral. And a staghorn coral is branching stony coral with a cylindrical branches. They're among the fastest growing corals on reefs and are excellent at building reefs. The gaps between their branches provide protection for small reef fish and other creatures. And if you look down in there a little bit, you can actually see some little fish hanging around in that staghorn reef. Pretty neat. Heavily dense, very dense reef. A little bit different than what we think of as coral reef. A lot of times, coral reef is we kind of look at it. There was a really good in the Great Barrier Reef virtual field trip. There's a really good reef that looks like a brain, and it's pretty neat. But these are very much different. They almost look like tree branches, right? Underwater tree branches, just growing along the edge there. Next up, we're going to go to Fago Muss Bay. What formerly began as the smallest national marine sanctuary has become one of the largest. In 2012, the sanctuary was extended to include Fago Muss Bay and other locations. It now covers 21,857 square kilometers, which calculates out to about 14,000 square miles. 14,000 square miles is a humongous piece of protected area. Fago Muss Bay is a hotspot for coral cover. As you can see in the picture, it's gorgeous. One of the coolest views in this virtual field trip. Over here, you'll see the tropical coral reef. The National Marine Sanctuary of American Samoa is one of the most remote locations of all 14 U.S. national marine sanctuaries. It is the only true tropical reef within the sanctuary system, and it supports the greatest diversity of marine life. So it's one of the few tropical. It's the only true tropical reef because of how warm the waters are and where it's located. It's so close to the equator. The waters are very warm, and a tropical reef, of course, needs very warm waters, and it needs constant warm waters. A lot of more northern oceans, a lot of times there's a lot of fluctuation between seasons and water temperatures. South Pacific, that closest to the equator, always a very warm water. So how do they manage these reefs, this protected area? They can't just let it go, right? Because something might happen to it if they do. So the National Marine Sanctuary of American Samoa is co-managed by NOAA, which we all know of as a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. They do a lot of weather forecasting and that kind of stuff. And it's in partnership with the American Samoa government. They work closely with local communities, all within the context of Samoan cultural traditions and practices. As I said, the Samoan tribes, the Samoan cultures is much like if you know anything about the native Hawaiian culture, in a lot of those South Pacific islands, they have a very unique culture that's very different from the mainland United States. And so they pay very close attention to that when they're maintaining these reefs and maintaining this area, because they don't want to offend the native tribes in this area. And a lot of times cultures use things from the earth in different ways that we would. So they have to work very closely when managing this type of stuff. Next up, we're going to the Rose Atoll Marine National Monument. The southernmost point of the United States is our next destination. The Rose Atoll is a tiny uninhabited island on the easternmost point of American Samoa. It was established as a marine national monument in 2009. It encompasses the Rose Atoll National Wildlife Refuge and is part of the National Marine Sanctuary of American Samoa. So over here, you'll see some really, really pretty fish, actually. So protecting the marine environment at Rose Atoll is one of the most pristine atolls in the world, actually, because it is so heavily protected. And once again, going back to the culture of American Samoa natives, their whole idea of protecting the environment is very strong in their culture, so they do a really good job at protecting these natural resources that we have. The ecosystem here is home of to a diverse range of marine species, many of which are threatened or endangered. So having high protection of a high level of protection is important. They are the species that are endangered. A lot of them do live around this atoll because it is so heavily protected and so well protected. So right down here, you'll actually see an example of, it's a pink coralline algae. So it's a different type of algae. One of the most striking features of the Rose Atoll is the pink color of the reef. And you can kind of see it in this picture. It's pretty good. It depends on how good of a computer screen or whatever you're looking at, how good it is. But it does definitely has a pinkish Pepto-Bismol type color to it. This is actually caused the reef is pink because of the algae that grows on the reef. So the reef, the coral isn't actually pink. It's an algae that grows on it, and this is the primary. The pink algae is actually a primary reef building species here, helping to cement the reef together. So the reef underneath that pink algae is very fragile, and so that pink algae then encompasses that coral, and when it does, it really holds everything together. We see this in a lot of different marine settings, even in colder water. We see this with different types of algae. It really does protect what's underneath of it. Now, sometimes, obviously, it can also hurt what's underneath of it. In man-made cases, it could hurt decking and ships and that kind of stuff. But in natural resource case, it's amazing how they just they come together and work harmoniously to be protected. It's like that pink algae is like that coral's big brother, and it's pretty neat to see that happen. The next one up is one of my favorite names of of a area. It's actually a coral, and it's called the Big Mama One. This is the one of the largest corals in the world, actually. And Big Mama is aptly named after obviously its size, and it's located in what they call the Valley of the Giants within the National Marine Sanctuary of American Samoa. So we're looking at Big Mama right now. It's pretty crazy. The coral head is 135 feet in circumference and 23 feet tall and 23 feet high. Pretty crazy. It's the true name. The true name is Fale Bami, in honor of Fale Tulaja, who discovered it. But Big Mama is the nickname of the local divers, and of course we can kind of see why it gets its name. You can see for reference there. No bananas for scale, but we do have a scuba diver scale. If you look over there, scuba divers, those scuba divers are pretty close to it. So you can actually see the just huge monstrosity of it, and you can also see everything that's growing on top of it too. It's really, really neat. Corals are fascinating creatures, I guess you would call them. So the Porites, coral head. Porites coral species like Big Mama are massive reef-building corals that grow very slowly. They can grow as little as 1 centimeter a year. 1 centimeter is like this much. They can grow this much in 1 year. And scientists have worked out that Big Mama has been growing slowly for quite a while. It's actually over 500 years this coral has been growing. Slowly but surely, this coral has been growing. This coral is like the turtles of coral. Like it's slow moving, but it's been around forever. Next up, we're going to go to slightly smaller, but still very large, Big Mama 2. Quite possibly the most iconic dive in American Samoa, Big Mama is one of the biggest corals in the world. The giant coral is located in the Valley of Giants, as I said, in the National Marine Sanctuary. And Big Mama 2 is here. You can see right here. This coral has kind of a weirdish. It almost looks like some gloppy food or something. That's actually a coral polyps that you see. This giant coral head is one animal made up of many individual coral polyps. Only the outer layer of the coral is living tissue. The coral polyps have plant-like algae living inside them, which help them survive by harnessing energy from the sun. So this coral, I don't know if it'll be, yeah, so you can see, this coral is not very far down. This is pretty shallow water. So it actually has the sun penetrates the ocean, and that's how it actually grows. The Valley of Giants, where these two, Big Mama and Big Mama 2, are both located, is a region of reef along the southwest corner of Taos Island. That contains numerous giant boulder corals, among the largest of the world. You can see 2 more of these ancient corals close by. So let's see if we can find them. Yeah, there's another one right there, and then there's another one right in front on the edge of that too. So it's interesting because the coral, you kind of have to think to yourself, why is this area such a coral hotbed? Why are there so many reefs and corals? And it's a lot to do with the climate. As I said, it's a very warm ocean, and it also has a lot to do with the protection that it has. And it is very heavily protected under federal law. You can't touch it. You can't break off a piece of it. There's a lot put into effect to keep it growing, to keep it going, and make sure that it isn't going to die, because corals, they are living, and occasionally corals can be destroyed by some sort of not a virus, but some sort of species that might cling onto it and destroy the entire coral, much like a plant that we think of on land. And so a lot of time, there's a lot of time taken for divers to go down and make sure that these corals are not close to death, or they don't have anything that's going to cause them to die, and they're all okay and safe. As I mentioned in the, I believe it was the Great Barrier Reef, the corals play a huge part in the ocean biosystem. They do a really good job at filtering out anything bad, and they provide a habitat for a lot of marine species, and there's a lot of things that they end up doing. So we've reached the end of today's virtual field trip, ending on Big Mama 2 here. That's a good place to end. So if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself, or you can also use the chat box to go ahead and ask any questions. I am not the best marine biologist, but I'll give a good try to answer anything if you have any. I do have a real short evaluation that I do want you to take. It's literally like 4 or 5 questions, and I really just want to know who attended today. And if you have any comments, there's a comment section also, and I'd love to hear some comments. If you have any places that you want to go, I do this every Friday, so I honestly, I've been doing it for, this is the 11th one now, and so I'm not quite sure where I'm going to go the next Friday until about Wednesday of the week. So if you have any ideas, feel free to share those in the evaluation.